Good morning, everybody. My name is Katie DeMedio. I am the Clinic Outreach Manager for Amen Clinics in Southern California, and I'm joined today with Dr. Mona Karimpour, who is a board-certified adult and adolescent psychiatrist with us at Amen Clinics. And today we are going to go through some mother scans, and we're going to talk about brain health as a building block for everything that we do in our lives as mothers, and how we care for ourselves and care for our families. So, Dr. Karimpour, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to go over some scans. And, Katie and I, when we started thinking about what are we going to do for Mother's Day, we actually got really excited because both of us have shared a lot of our experiences with having babies during COVID, especially, we're in California, so with the lockdowns, we had our fair share of experiences, and we just got really excited to go through some scans and basically how we can help women out there, especially in these kind of fearful and difficult times. So I'm just going to actually delve right into this and talk about some scans, and then we'll start chatting about some of our experiences and how we hope to help today. So basically, just a brief overview. This is looking at healthy blood flow for a female in the age range of 28 to 37. We're looking at 4 different angles of the brain here. On this set of scans, we made it fluorescent, so it looks pretty, but wherever we see these dark areas indicates low blood flow. I am going to just go through some anatomy, and I'm going to make it brief, actually. One of the areas that we look at when we look at the outer scans is this prefrontal area, and that's the area that's involved with attention, judgment, planning, and concentration. And if we see what looks like holes or dark areas, that indicates low blood flow. This particular female, when she came in 2017 to get her scans, was struggling with attention deficit. And as you can see, we see these big holes, these dark areas, in that prefrontal area on this angle here. And we want it to actually look like this. So she worked really hard and took a lot of our recommendations on how to help her attention deficit disorder. And then came back last year in 2020, got another scan, and saw some improvements. Looks really nice on this angle here in the prefrontal. However, she came back in 2020 because she was struggling. And so another set of scans that we look at is the internal set of scans, and that's these colorful ones. So this is average activity for a female in her age range, and this is looking at the internal brain. And what we're looking at, this is 4 different angles of the brain. On this set of scans, color matters, meaning blue is resting level of activity, red is active, white means there's a lot of blood flow. And the cerebellum is the area involved with higher order processing, speed of thought, and speech. If we see low blood flow in this area, sometimes we think there might be some attention deficit going on. The deep limbic is the area involved with depression. On the sides, the basal ganglia is the area involved with anxiety, and we want these structures to only be red. And then on top, that anterior cingulate is the gear shifter of the brain. So if people have too much blood flow here, they tend to get stuck on things and obsess about them over and over again. Back in 2017, this is how her scans looked. She had a little bit of white in this area, the deep limbic, the area involved with depression, and a little bit of white in the basal ganglia, not so much. Now, when she came back to us in 2020, trying to figure out, you know what, my attention deficit is better, but I'm still struggling. What's going on? And her scans actually ended up showing a lot of anxiety here. And so that's why we're seeing the white in these 2 areas. A little bit of depression as well, but a lot of white in the anxiety areas. So what was surprising for her is she was like, I can't figure out what's going on. I've done all the things to help my attention deficit, but I'm struggling. and she had a baby, and of course during COVID. So sometimes when we're in the middle of something, it's hard to kind of see through the fog. But with when she came to our clinics again and got a scan, seeing, oh my gosh, okay, I'm pretty stressed out. And, to me, that makes sense. We were in the middle of a pandemic. You just had a baby, all these hormonal changes. And so this is kind of where we are today. And we'd love to talk about these scans and share with you whose scans these actually are.
Dr. Karimpour, this is awesome. So let's just get there. I'm going to be totally transparent, and I think no one will be surprised. Those are my scans, right? I mean, and when you're talking through them and you're walking through them, that's exactly what it was like. And it's interesting because when you talk about the cerebellum and processing speed, that's actually what I experienced. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I can't think straight. Like, I've always been ADD, and I don't mean that as a joke. Like, this is definitely a brain thing. It's something I've worked on essentially my whole life, even when I didn't know I was working on working through my ADD. But there was a point in time where I realized I couldn't think straight. I couldn't get my thoughts in order, and that was different. I remember talking to my husband and saying, when people talk about weather on the news and they say high 70s or low 70s, I had to work through my brain which was the bigger number. And it was bizarre and it was concerning. And then so the way that this all happened was that I essentially called our medical director and I said, hey, it's me this time. It's me. Like, I need to work through some stuff. And I'm so lucky because we were doing a training. We had a doctor who was training, and so I got to go through this whole evaluation process. And I talk about what we do all the time. I think it's a major gift of insight. And I think that it gives us, the opportunity to serve people in a way that they haven't been served before, specifically if they're stuck. And what I mean by stuck is I have therapists come to me all the time and say, well, Katie, everybody has a brain. How do I know when to send somebody to you? And I say, well, send me your stucks. Send me the folks that you are so skilled and that by now, whatever intervention you've been using should have worked by now. Or you have somebody who has a diagnosis based on their symptoms, therefore they have a medication that matches that diagnosis. All of that makes sense and they're not getting better. And so I know the value of this process because I talk about it all the time, and I see the people who come to see Dr. Karimpour and I see how much their lives are changed and I see how much goes into it. And so this is what goes into it. I decided to do this process for myself after having just a scan in the past before. As working there, it's really cool when people don't show up for their scans. Sometimes they need somebody to step in, and that was me in 2017. And this time I did the whole thing. And what the whole thing consists of is about 20 pages of intake paperwork where we go over your entire history. It's a biological, psychological, social, spiritual based program, but it's also brain systems driven. And so I filled out a brain systems checklist, and my husband did too. And when I filled out the one for anxiety, I think I rated myself at maybe a 2. It's a scale from 1 to 4. I rated myself at a 2, and he rated me at a 4. And I was like, do you really think I'm that anxious? And he's like, babe, you'll be standing in the kitchen, nothing's happening, and you're like a little bit, I was losing like my breath. And I've not really had like a panic attack before, but now looking at it, I think maybe that's what was happening. So I fill out all that paperwork. He fills out the same paperwork, and it's reviewed by a patient outcome manager. The patient outcome manager actually reviews it, and then they sit down and they meet with you over the phone for about an hour, hour and a half, and they go over all of those questions again, but they do a deep dive. And one of the deep dive questions that she asked me, and this is how I knew something else was going on with depression. I was driving down the road and I had this thought that my very existence on this earth was a net negative. I do more harm than I do good. And I know that that's not true. And I was like, oh, that's such a weird thought to have. And then the next thought that came was, well, that's not depression, it's the truth. And I literally stopped thought. And I was like, absolutely not. That's not the truth. That's ridiculous. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, I am experiencing this whole, and everybody's experience is different, but I was experiencing a postpartum something called, maybe the storm of everything that was happening. And then she did a deep dive into a question like that. And then it became a little bit more clear to me that maybe I was struggling even more than I thought. So then I come in and I do the scans and I see them and I was like, "Oh my gosh, look, that's crazy. Look at my, my basal ganglia is way worse than it was before. Oh my gosh, it's not me. It's not just my thoughts, it's my brain, right?" And I always talk about how sometimes when you're too close to something, it's hard to see. Like if you're standing in front of a piece of artwork, but you're standing an inch away, you can't really grasp the beauty of that piece of art. But if you take a step back and you're on the outside looking in, then it's a lot easier to see what's going on. And that's what,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely, and that's one of the things you mentioned earlier today too. You know, I've been doing this at the clinic for over 10 years now, and one of the things that's so important is, there's a lot of overlap between all these symptoms, and with ADD, it's attention, focus, concentration problems, but with anxiety, it's the same thing. You see a lot of, you're like a deer in headlights. You're just standing there and you can't focus very well. Or with depression, you can have this brain fog, so the focus and concentration are off. And those are completely different diagnoses that require different management of it. One other thing you touched on, which was just, just it really broke my heart, was when you mentioned, is my existence even, is it even worth it?
Mm,
And this is, with you, and you have a beautiful baby, it's a miracle. And to be asking yourself that question, it's just, it's so hard, to even think, oh my gosh, a new mom who's so excited, and this baby is looking up at you with these beautiful eyes, and you're thinking, am I even
yeah.
worth living?
Yeah.
um, it's hard, and
Yeah.
it's really tough.
And I think, yeah, thank you. And I think that that's kind of the point, is that sometimes you don't even know that you're in it, right? And that's the value of doing this and like seeing your brain. Because thank God I know enough to know that those are just, like, I knew that that wasn't me. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, I knew it wasn't actually me. So then, Dr. Karimpour, can you talk a little bit about how you see this process, and this deep dive into the brain and this evaluation helping other moms in general?
Yeah, in general, I mean, one we already kind of touched on and we showed you guys today. It's, you get to see what exactly is going on instead of going through, the symptoms checklist. We do that in addition. SPECT is another diagnostic tool, but we also do, with the complete workup, we're doing PHQ-9, which is, a very valid research depression inventory scale. We do GAD, which is generalized anxiety. We're doing all of the questionnaires, the checklists, and also the spec scans to look at all of this. And then I jumped in because I got excited. But after you do the entire intake, guess who you get to meet with? You get to meet with one of our psychiatrists, right? And so again, we spend hours going through the scans with you and going over, okay, what is the accurate diagnosis? What is a helpful treatment plan? Whether, depending on the severity of symptoms, do we start with supplements? Do we start definitely with lifestyle changes? And also, do we need medications at this point? Or do we do more of a hormonal workup? We're talking about moms. Moms were, as new moms, we know that there's thyroid changes, hormonal changes postpartum. And even as older moms, perimenopausal, menopausal, there's constant changes going on. So it's useful to come to a physician and actually get a very thorough workup, and then included in our scans, we have 2 half-hour appointments with the doctor again. And so, again, that's time to reevaluate. Okay, how is this treatment plan working? How have we been able to help you? What other pieces might we be needing to look at? And like you said, obviously, collaboration is key. Do we need some therapy? Do we need some neurofeedback? What other tools do we have in our belt that I can help you kind of see from the outside, and help you to go and move forward and not feel like your life is not worth it,
Yeah.
or you're so nervous that you can't take that full breath.
Yeah. That's so cool. And I love that detail, like how much deep diving you do um, in your approach to evaluation. Because imagine, right? Imagine someone having a thought like that and then just never getting their hormones checked or never getting, a full workup, never seeing their brain, never understanding that they're really experiencing brain changes. But this whole process and the way that you do it and the psychiatrist at Amen Clinics does it gives that entire perspective. And also, another thing that's really interesting is that we can also do genetic testing. That's another piece of what I got to do is I want to know, like I want to know everything. And I got to see like my brain metabolizes dopamine way too quickly. So of course it's hard for me to concentrate. I mean, I can see it in my scans, I can see it in my symptoms, but literally I can see it in my blood work too. Um, so I think for me, the call to action is if you've got a mama in your life somewhere, your partner, your wife, your mom, your aunt, you see somebody in your life who's struggling, Mother's Day is coming up. Consider maybe offering this as a gift of insight to them. And the best way to do that is just to call. Our phone number is 888-288-9834. And then you can ask for Dr. Karimpour directly.
Now let's just talk about, okay, mamas, what do we do? How do we self-care?
Okay, let's talk about it right now. How do we self-care?
Well, so Katie, you and I, let's tell our watchers some of our own stories of how things were when we first. I'll start myself because I. It's funny, when I was pregnant, not many of my patients noticed, and I worked until literally the last day, and and I had one patient who saw me the last week, and she's like, "Oh, you're pregnant? You're never going to come back to work again. How am I going to find another doctor? Who am I going to go to?" And I said, "I am scheduled 3 weeks postpartum to start working again." And she was like, "No, you're not going to come back." And I'm like, "Why wouldn't I? I've worked all this hard, to go through medical school, psych training, residency, everything, even specialized training with Dr. Amen to learn about SPECT. And I'm not going to just throw that all away. I will come back." And now that I look back, to to come back to work 3 weeks, physically to come back to work 3 weeks postpartum, that was just not realistic. And my son was born February 28th. Literally 3 weeks later, it was a blessing in disguise for me.
Yeah.
It was a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, though. But literally 3 weeks later, COVID struck and we were on shutdown. And so Dr. Aim and the entire clinic's like, "Okay, the doctors, you guys are going to stay at home and work remotely." And
Mhm.
literally 3 weeks later, I had, patient schedule. So I got to stay home and work remotely. But this is my first time as a mom. I didn't realize I'm going to be losing sleep. I'm going to be having to wake up every 4 hours. And, when I have patients, I'm home, but my husband's working. So we managed it as well as we could that he would go sooner and come back to relieve me. But there were times when, my patients would hear a baby in the background. And, I think luckily I had started very lightly, and it was a lot of my patients that knew me. And so it wasn't a surprise. I was doing my medication checks and things like that. But it started getting to a point where I was like, I need help and I don't have the help. So I started learning how to schedule my new evaluations and my new patients um, all around our work schedule so that I could actually come sit down and, shut the door and be able to do these Zoom meetings without any interactions and distractions. But it's exhausting and it's been hard. It's been a tough year. Luckily now things have lightened up a little bit, but it was hard juggling. I'm not gonna, lie about it. I think I haven't worn makeup in a while. Today is one of the exceptions when before I used to, always have my hair done, always have my makeup on and be at the door. And so things are a little different. I know things are different for you too, Katie.
Definitely different for me. That's so, and I like this. Like, I like this, like this realness. Like, let's talk about this morning, how things actually went for you and I. So my daughter's teething, right? And so she was up every hour last night. You could probably hear her in the background. And finally by 3 a.m, I just grabbed her and I put her into bed with me. And then I forgot to turn my alarm off. So at 6, she was up and ready to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, Dr. Karimpour, I need to literally go put on about 2 pounds of makeup, but just to like erase the exhaustion from last night. And it just like, you just, I guess, balance it. And I think thinking, and when you were talking about, the end of February, beginning of March, yeah, that was very different because it's like I had just gone back to work. I think I only went into the office 2 times. And I had been a little bit, really watching this whole thing unfold because you and I both had babies born during cold and flu season. So I was already watching that and I was concerned about that. And then I went home and I was like, I can figure it out. I'll make it work. My partner doesn't have a job where he's able to work from home. He's really, out there in the community. And and then I lost my childcare plan. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to do both and I'll make it work. And it's the first time in an employment situation where I've asked for help and needed it and I took it. And actually that started happening toward the end of my pregnancy. I was like still doing conferences and stuff. And I was like, no, I really do need to ask for help. And not only do I need to ask for it, I need to actually take it when people offer. And I remember I was doing this event. I was invited to speak for a brain injury network. And I planned it around my daughter's work schedule or my daughter's sleep schedule, and it didn't work out. And I had a coworker on with me, and I was literally nursing my daughter and sweating because it was hot and doing this event. And I will never forget that because I had to literally be 2 people at one time. And if not for the support of, a coworker and friend, it wouldn't have happened. I had all of these people there to listen to me talk. And then I had a baby that I just had to, and everything just shifts. But gosh, things are so different now. I guess you'll just learn, right?
Well, going back to, your anxiety was heightened. I think one thing I know we're both comfortable sharing is both of our husbands are frontline workers. So mine is also a physician, but he had to go into the hospital. And if you remember, back then we knew, okay, we need to mask up and glove up, but we weren't aware of we didn't know all the details
Right.
about it. And so when he would come home, for the first few weeks, our fear was what if we catch it? How's the baby going to be affected? So he would literally come home, change in the garage and desanitize, then take a shower, and then come in and take over. And so that was a very scary time for both of us.
Mhm.
But I have the same story where, I was very meticulous on how to manage it so that it wouldn't interfere with my patients. But they had put a Zoom med check for me, and he hadn't come home in time. I was stressing out. How am I gonna? Where am I gonna put my baby? He's very active. I don't want the patient to see my baby around. This is embarrassing. What do I do? Do I put him in a stroller and walk on the Zoom? What do I do? I was in such a panic, and I was like, you know what? Worst case scenario. Why am I stressing myself out? I'll just reschedule the call. It's not a big deal. And what actually ended up happening is she was this grandmother, the patient, and she was just the sweetest thing. Because for the first 10 minutes, we were talking and everything was fine. And like you said, their nap time is not predictable. So he wakes up and he wants to be held. So I was like, I really apologize, but my husband's not back home yet. And I have a baby that needs to be held. And she just fell in love with him. And every time now that we meet up, she's like, "How is he? Let me see him." But it was the hardest thing for me because I am so used to being, professional and
Mhm.
setting different boundaries with work and home, and this meshing it. And it like you said, it was kind of stressful. Looking back on it, I can laugh now, and we've kind of gotten in our groove of things. But one of the things really is taking time to realize, okay, you know what? Even if it's 15 minutes, let me just unwind and listen to soothing music. Whether it's okay, let's go out and eat, outdoor, um, something to kind of just, like you said, put on makeup, get your hair done, get your nails done. Some kind of self-care is definitely needed. And there's tons of articles and studies right now about how stressful it has been for women financially, juggling, in states that had lockdowns and the kids weren't at school. I have a lot of patients where the mothers, they have teenagers, college age students, and they're home, and you would think, okay, they're not babies, they're not needing that type of attention. But in a different realm, it's harder because, you know, these high school kids aren't being able to go to prom. They're not being able to do all the outdoor activities they used to and be in the sports. And that affects the moms, right? Because they were excited, wanting their children to have fun in these milestones. So it's been tough on everyone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
That's I really, it's interesting what it's been so hard, right? I mean, and there's been so many, my heart just breaks for people who have been impacted by this in the worst way. And there's this piece of, I think, meshing that has happened. And I agree with you. Like, I'm not a psychiatrist, and so I do wonder, like, how you've all managed to blend this when, you've got to be the psychiatrist too. But I think there's a huge value in just being a human, right, with your patients. I think that in this time, and I talked to another one of our psychiatrists about this too, that if during these times every psychiatrist on our team just showed up like nothing was going on in their lives, also, it would have been weird. And I think that I don't know. I just think that the beauty is that people get to see who we are in or you, especially in a way that maybe they wouldn't have before. I think that there's a lot of benefit in that. Because as a psychiatrist, you probably can't self-disclose. You don't self-disclose, and I do know you as a very, very serious professional. And then at the same time, we were all going through this together. Um, it's an interesting image to imagine that baby with you during a psychiatry appointment. And of course, a grandma would be stoked on it. That's so cute.
I know, especially because, and from their perspective too, and we keep talking about women, and I know it's because it's Mother's Day coming up, but grandparents in general not sometimes being able to see their family because they were so worried. And again, I mean, the men are also involved in all of this. I don't want to just isolate them. It's not a gender driven. Um, it COVID hit everyone.
Yeah.
It's been tough for the single parents out there, especially. But just every age that you look at has been affected, and my heart bleeds. And you're right, as psychiatrist, I mean, like I had mentioned earlier, it's a double-edged sword. I love the fact that I'm home. I'm able to pop in and out and see him and be with him. But at the same time, I'm home. So I need to do the self-care. I
Mhm.
don't get to go out. There's been days when my car is just sitting in the garage. So luckily I live in nice Southern California. The weather is usually really good, so I do the self-care, and every morning or afternoon I'm out, and we're walking and strolling and by the beach, jogging and doing some of those activities. I tell my patients, if the weather is bad where you guys are, I'm licensed in 10 different states now. So, my Texas patients, that horrible snowstorm, I said, you know
Wow.
what? It sounds silly, but there's free YouTube videos. And there's been times when I've done it while he's napping, and you can do it indoor. It's free. Just exercise. Even if you're not up for it, push yourself to do 7 minutes a day. Just do those quick little, because that'll get your dopamine going. That's a good self care. And you can do it. You can make time for yourself to do some of those natural things, to exercise, to make healthier food choices, even, right?
Mhm.
We've talked about this again, postpartum baby fat.
Mhm.
So, it takes an initiative, but it's those little steps that's going to make the Groundhog Day of COVID kind of different.
Mm.
And we're all human, of course. None of us have superpowers. So we all kind of have to keep reiterating these things to ourselves and do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is the little tiny things. It is the little things. And sometimes to me, it's like today self care looks like being easier on myself, right? Like yesterday in preparation for this, I was like, well, crap, I really got to do some self care if I'm going to talk about motherhood self care. And so I just went, I mean, and I do this anyway, but there's a little hiking trail by my house. And yes, we live in Southern California. We're so blessed. It's gorgeous right now, specifically. And it would have been so easy to just get into the spin cycle of my day. And I was like, no, I'm going to take these 5 minutes and I'm going to walk. And, like when I have time, I'm also a runner, but I haven't been doing that. And I have to let that go. I have to say, a walk is enough. You put your shoes on, you step outside for 5 minutes, you're going to end up out there for longer. That is true. I was actually talking to a CEO of a company. She has a she owns an amazing nonprofit, and she was talking about a form of self-care where you go, and I haven't tried it yet, but you go and you grieve for 5 minutes. You set a timer and you grieve for 5 minutes, and then you set it down and you leave the room. Like, you don't do it while you're in the middle of being upset necessarily, but you set that time aside. And then I was talking to another friend today who's a new mom, and she said the thing that I had planned for self-care or for my childcare didn't work out, and I have all of these things. And the thing I said to her is like, well, what are you going to do for yourself in the midst of all this? She said, I think I'm going to cry for 5 minutes. I was like, whoa, that's weird. That's what that lady said. And then I was talking to my boss yesterday, and I was like, Dr. K and I are going to do a thing on, Mother's Day and self care. And she goes, it's really cool. I went on a walk around the lake. There were ducks, and I was wondering to myself, why don't I do this more often? I was like, okay, so we need to commit to doing that. There really are just like these little tiny things that you can do to shift your entire mood. Um, it is so small, and it makes a huge difference. Anyway, I'm rambling because I do that.
Well, I think we've done a fun job together, and I know our time is coming up. If people want to see more of us rambling and chatting, I'd love to do it.
So again, from all of us at Amen Clinics, Dr. Karimpour, and myself, Katie DeMedio, I want to thank you for your time. And if you are interested in pursuing a full evaluation process with us here at Amen Clinics and gaining a better understanding of yourself through your brain and understanding your brain, feel free to give us a call, 888-288-9834. Mother's Day is coming up, and what better way to show love to the mamas in your life than to help support them getting the care and attention that they need and understanding their brain and brain health in a way that is unique to them. Thank you so much and happy Mother's Day.